Regular meeting, City of Farmington Hills, for March 24th, 2022. It is 7:30. We're here at City Hall in Farmington Hills. Calling the meeting to order. Roll call. I think all members are here. We do have one member who recently stepped down, and I want to make a few comments about Steve Schwartz. He was a longtime planning commissioner, former chair of the commission. Did a fantastic job as commissioner. We appreciated his insight, and he's also on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So he's been a tremendous public servant to the community, and we wish Steve all the best, and we'll miss him. Having said that, that's roll call. Everybody's here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by John, second. Second by Barry. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. First item is we have a public hearing tonight. The public hearing is on a zoning text amendment 2 of 2021. It is an amendment to the chapter of code, the zoning ordinance, which is 34, chapter 34. The proposed amendment amends the definition of family in the various sections of Chapter 34, the zoning to provide equal housing opportunities, particularly issued to the needs of persons entitled to reasonable accommodations under state and federal law within the one family and planned residential zoning districts. The action tonight that's requested is we make a recommendation to our city council. Sections in question are 34-2.2, 34-3.1.1 through 34-3.1.9, and add a new section, 34-4.60. Let's start the meeting before we get to a public hearing with Rod Arroyo. He'll give the overview of the text amendment, and then we'll open it up to questions of the commission, and then we'll hold the public hearing. Rod?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission has been studying this topic over a period of several months, looking at making a few changes. As you indicated, there's some definition changes that are proposed. One would be the existing definition of family is being modified to provide some clarification on a couple of items that I think have come up over time through some various cases that the city has been involved with, as well as some internal review and discussion. We're also adding, with this proposal, there'd be two new definitions that would be added, one being reasonable accommodation, the other being a special accommodation residence. These are intended to provide for definitions of specific uses that would be residential uses where those living within the home in question would qualify as handicapped or disabled under the Americans with Disability Act, the Fair Housing Act, or the Rehabilitation Act. And then the final component of this is getting into the use standards of the ordinance, where it actually provides for specific use standards associated with the special accommodation residence. And here, there are various standards in terms of review, applicability, conditions of approval, application provisions, including what would need to be submitted as part of one of those applications, and then standards and regulations as they apply to that particular use, and then the effect of approval. So that's a short summary. I'll be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Rod. Barry, question for Rod?
Yeah, these amendments are made because legally speaking, we had to make the amendments to conform with changes in the federal law. Is that correct? So even though it's very long and very complicated and makes very little sense, I understand why we have to do it. So.
Mr. Royal is nodding his head affirmatively to.
I'm not granting a legal opinion, but as a planner, I would say yes, I think that's generally correct.
And I guess I
You want to weigh in?
I just add to that you sure some of the definitions are to clear up what court cases have said, but yeah, that we have been doing a lot of what is in this ordinance without having the ordinance in place, and I think this just sort of clarifies that we are and have been doing this because we had to. So,
Very good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Joe?
Yes, so we're doing this in response to some court decisions that have been made. And I just, clarify here, is there any changes here that we should be aware of that go beyond, in your opinion, meeting the court's findings or whatever you lawyers call them?
again, I'm not going to speak as a planner. You know, a lot of this is clarifying the kinds of things that the planning department can ask these uses to provide as, you know, when they go through their approval process. It's really, we're writing down essentially what we've been doing and maybe adding some clarifications that we have the right to require conditions and things like that, but we haven't added a huge amount to what, you know. what we've
I
been-
just wanted to establish that before we voted, that's all. Yep.
It sounds like this kind of captures what we're currently doing, but this kind of codifies in writing that we're in conformance with planning standards, legal standards, and so we're up to snuff. Okay, any other questions from the commission? Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up to the public hearing. If you represent yourself, you have 3 minutes. If you represent an association, you have 5 minutes unless otherwise an exception granted by the chair. So we'll open the hearing. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on this zoning text amendment? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Take it back to the Planning Commission. Barry, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move to recommend approval to City Council of Zoning Text Amendment 2, 2021, which proposes to amend zoning ordinance in numerous separate sections, including Article 2 definitions to revise the definition of family and add definitions of reasonable accommodation and special accommodation residence. Article 3 zoning districts to add special accommodation residence as a principal permitted use within the RA1A, RA1B, RA2B, RA1, RA2, RA3, and RA4, one-family residential districts, and RP-1 and RP-2 planned residential districts, and Article 4 use standards to add new regulations for special accommodation residences.
Thank you for the motion. Support by John. Any questions on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, that'll be will be recommended to City Council. The next item is the Planning Commission's Capital Improvement Plan for 2022, 2023 through 2027 through 2028. The action in question is the adoption of the plan. It is a planning document that annually this body reviews with department heads the capital needs of the community, that either is an individual capital plan or a network of plans that we review, and over a period of 5 years, put our stamp of approval on a plan. This plan will be shared with City Council once we adopt it. This is also a public hearing item. I'll turn to staff. Is there any comments the staff wants to make on the plan, or is there any business the staff would like to present at this point?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Just to point out that there is a draft motion as well as a general motion in your packets that was supplied by former Commissioner Schwartz for consideration. And it's up to the Planning Commission essentially what, action they want to take in that regard. A general motion, consider that motion, whatever it may be.
Okay, Eric, thank you very much. Now I'll turn to the commissioners. Any comments? Motion?
No.
On the plan?
We still have public.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for the reminder. I'd like to open the public hearing at this point. Those of you wishing to speak on the capital improvement plan, you have 3 minutes to present your points, or 5 minutes as an individual, or 5 minutes as an association. Anybody here would like to speak on the capital improvement plan? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion. Back to the commission. Yes, Barry.
I move to adopt the City of Farmington Hills Capital Improvement Plan for 2022 through 2023 through 2027 to 2028 as presented, and that the plan be forwarded to City Council.
Second.
Second by Steve, thank you. We have a motion to approve or adopt the plan by Barry, supported by Steve. Any comment on the motion? Joe?
Well, yeah, I'd like to discuss this. Looking over the notes, the meeting notes from that January meeting, I raised the possibility of looking at one piece of snow removal equipment in the future meant for sidewalks. Okay? And I said, according to this, that this is a planning document, and, you know, I wanted to include that snow removal, because snow removal for pedestrians on sidewalks is a future planning consideration that I do feel much better about now after Monday's meeting, knowing that there's going to be some planning for non-motorized transportation, but still, I'd like to see some token toward that in the budget for the public works. So I'm going to ask that whoever, I guess I can make a motion to amend.
Well, so do you have a specific proposal?
Yep.
And what year would you propose it? And do you have like a dollar amount? Do you have an idea of what dollar amount you want to put in there?
Well, you know, I thought that this might be revised, but it doesn't seem to be revised to include that.
Well, it's our document, so we can, through the
Okay.
motion now, you can make an
Yeah.
amendment.
I was going to ask Public Works, who I don't believe is here, for a ballpark figure, so I'm gonna go with $50,000 in the last, need my glasses, in 2027, 28. Now, that's not the only thing I want to say, but
That's gonna be not that far with inflation.
with inflation, as an economist, I still do think that the inflation is somewhat temporary. I don't think it's going to be runaway. And I would say that if you look at many of these, I don't know that they include much in the way of inflation. I just happen to have the DPW equipment. They increase it from 2020, from this year to next year, from 930,000 to 935,000. It's not much. And I think it's gonna cost in today's dollars less than 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, I would anticipate if you're talking about sidewalks, it may be a tractor with a brush on the front, whatever.
They may already own the truck.
Right, and that
Who
may
knows?
be within that ballpark. I think, again, that,
Yes.
we don't do budgeting here, but we do kind of want to project what we think costs would be. So, Joe, what years are we talking now?
Not the future, but just before that, the 2027 and 2028
Okay, so. the ma-
fiscal year.
Okay,
So I move that we add that item for sidewalk snow removal equipment,
very good,
$50,000 in 2027, 28.
beautiful. So, Barry, do you accept that amendment to your motion, that we approve the plan with the proviso that we include a piece of equipment to do snow removal
For sidewalks.
from sidewalks? Yes.
I think we should hear something from our city attorney first, because there's probably a reason why we don't do sidewalks because of liability purposes.
No, I can answer that question. We don't need an attorney. It used to be in the state of Michigan 15 years ago that there were liability issues. But those liability issues, perhaps the attorney can explain exactly how, but they're no longer there.
So I guess I'm gonna go about this the long way and just say, this is your document. You're not actually buying anything. You're not creating any liability by putting this in there. Is the city ever really gonna buy anything to plow snow on a sidewalk? I don't know.
I believe the liability Mr. Brickner was discussing
I
was in the past, if you shoveled a sidewalk and someone fell, you would be liable. But that is no no longer true, or it has certainly changed significantly.
Joe, through the chair.
Yeah.
So I'm picking up what Tom is saying, that this gives it's our document. It gives the policymakers an indication of where we're at, how we're thinking about it. Maybe we're thinking that in the future, that's something the city's got to consider. I don't think it's a major policy shift or major change to what's being done, other than they'll see it in there as something the planning commission is thinking about, the council should consider.
Yeah, and I guess I understand Mr. Mante's comment. I understand the rules he's talking about in the law, but I just don't know that it's the planning commission's function to worry about.
I agree. I don't think we
City's
should
legal
delve
opinion
into
of that.
that, the legal machinations of that.
And I would like to add that I want to insert this to highlight a planning issue. I do not necessarily call for the purchase of this equipment. I call for the city council to consider whether or not the city should do this, or whether or not they should require certain businesses. And I will reiterate what I said in January, that I am targeting only, at this point, I do remember Mr. Connigan saying, baby steps. I am only looking at 12 Mile and Grand River, where buses go up and down. And I feel strongly that something should be done about the conditions of those sidewalks during the winter, and I don't care what the city council decides we should do, but I've been talking about it for over 10 years, and nothing has happened, so I would like to have this placeholder inserted.
And I think through the document, if we so amend the motion, and through the minutes of our meeting that Cheryl's going to capture, the city council will get a sense of where we're at on the issue.
So my question is this specifically, is he talking about putting it in the sidewalks budget, or is he talking about putting the DPW equipment budget?
Well, that's
DPW equipment budget.
Okay, I have no objections.
okay, for the purposes of sweeping sidewalks, particularly on Grand River and 12 Mile.
I think I
Okay.
made that clear.
Minutes will reflect that. I think it's something we can do as an amendment. If you second, you're okay with that, Steve? Okay. Any other comments? Cheryl, do you have that?
Already got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have more comments.
You have more comments? Okay.
It was pointed out that we had a draft motion from Mr. Schwartz. Trying to go to the essence of the draft motion, I had a question for the city of all of the expenditures that are planned, and I don't have that page marked, of all the expenditures that are planned at the Hawk and the Caustic Center.
Here, that's the numbers.
Okay. There's 20 million needed, 9 million is prioritized for the caustic.
3 million for the Hawk.
We've got 3 million plus 7 million, 10 million at the Hawk. My question was how much of that comes, because I can't tell from this, when it says CF Capital Fund, how much of that is from the Parks and Recreation millage? Does anyone know?
You're looking as a funding source?
As a funding source. I don't, you know, because it is a lot of money. The 10 million plus the 9 million, I believe that it's fair to say that over the next 5 years, it looks like it's, this budget includes, without consideration of inflation, evidently, it includes 4.1 million a year for 5 years. So that would be $20.5 million. And one of the other concerns that were reflected in the draft from past Commissioner Schwartz, was that there's no money allocated for the Grand River corridor. Now,
Joe, what page are you looking at right now? The chart you're looking at?
I'm sorry, it's page 28.
Okay, thank you.
There's Caustic Center as the bottom line, and the Hawk is the top line. The Hawk is 2.6 million a year for 5 years. I mean, I understand that some kind of investment needs to be made in order to use the third floor and perhaps capture some revenue. The issue with the Caustic Center, I thought we had discussed, was these funds are for the 1.5 million a year, and then 11 million still needed after 5 years, were to rehab the Caustic Center. And I am hopeful and got sort of a sense in the January meeting that perhaps there was some kind of consideration of whether or not I would like to see the Caustic Center considered for closure now that we have the Hawk, and sale of that property, and development of that property. Maybe I am open to any suggestions on how we might accomplish that, not accomplish that, but get to the point of making that consideration, perhaps a line item, to do a study of whether or not we should keep the Caustic Center afloat. Or are we just gonna go spend $1.5 million this year and then next year decide we should close it? I don't know.
It seems to me right now we have like two issues before us. One, you have
Yeah.
the capital improvement plan where the department has come to the planning commission saying that there's funding for the Hawk, and they perceive funding into the future for the Hawk, and they do perceive funding for the Caustic Center. The issue of whether or not one or other is closed, that seems to me to be a separate issue from this plan. Certainly, if this body felt that we didn't want a particular facility in our plan, I guess we could remove it, but that would be somewhat contrary to what we were hearing from the department. So, from my sense, it's almost like that's a separate issue, that perhaps a separate motion, that we have concerns about the extent of funding for two facilities and overlapping of services and efficiencies, and really, is it practical for us going, looking to the future to have two facilities, and how are we going to be able to finance them? I think, is that what you're asking, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So does the commission have any thought on that in terms of, to me, I'm saying this is what we had based on what was represented to us by special services. It's in our plan. Barry?
Well, as we all know, they're building a senior facility behind the Caustic Center, and it's going to be walkable from the senior facility to the Caustic Center, which is going to be catering to seniors. So I really don't want to sit and discuss what's going to happen to the Caustic Center right now, especially when we're trying to put it through the capital improvement program, when we're going to have a very large population of seniors living right next door to it, and that would be the perfect spot for someplace specifically for seniors. And the swimming pool at the Caustic Center is a lot different from the swimming pool over at the Hawk. One was meant more for recreation, the other one's meant more for doing laps. And I don't see it as a smart move at this point in time to try to close down the Caustic Center. It does need repairs, I understand that, because it's an older building. Plus, the fact is, the question is what's going to be happening to the people that were attached to over there. The Sisters of Mercy is on the other end, is right behind the Caustic Center. You can't just get rid of one thing without dealing with them.
They're moved out. They're starting the demolition already.
Yeah, but the fact, they're demoing behind the Caustic Center, not.
From the utility building back, I believe, I remember.
So I really don't want to see us talking about closing down the Caustic Center when we're getting a very large concentration of senior citizens, which includes people like me and you, Joe, being shut down when you're gonna have a bunch of seniors concentrated right behind a building.
So if I may, it's, my starting point was, where does this money come from? If this is the Parks and Rec millage, I pretty much have no issue. The voters have spoken. If this is from the general fund, and we are saying go spend $30 million on recreation here, and we are saying we refuse to spend $200,000 as cited by Mr. Schwartz on Grand River because it is in, the intent was to use tax increment financing, and there is no tax increment financing, so it's, the planning has sat there for 5 or 10 years, then I'm very frustrated by this. But I don't even know the answer to question 1. So
I,
Answer question 2 for you.
yeah, I don't think it's been, so this is staff's recommendation that they presented to us in terms of what they think the budget's going to be. Ultimately, the city council, this legislative body responsible for budgets, will have to make a determination whether that's even practical. So I'm not going to get all, I'm not going to get all excited about $30 million because that may just be a pipe dream that staff thinks that's what they need to fulfill a vision that someone has, when the practical aspect of it is we have limited millage, we have other priorities, and that may not happen at all. I guess my question is there somewhere in the plan in terms of Grand River you'd like to show funding through the capital improvement plan, show a project through capital improvement plan? Do you want it included here? Because what I'm saying is you don't necessarily knock this down, because this is going to be dependent upon council and their legislative and budgetary process, whether this goes or doesn't go as laid out in our plan. So,
Mr. Schwartz was our representative on the Grand River Corridor Improvement Group. I have to say off the top of my head, I wouldn't know where to add it.
right.
But I sure would want to add it next year, and I'd like that in these minutes for the next capital improvement discussion.
Right. Certainly, we've had a longstanding plan to improve Grand River, and through a TIF, tax increment financing, and it requires development to get the incremental tax dollars for improvements, and that hasn't come to fruition. So whatever kind of stimulus that the city could provide in some way to help that area flourish, that would be a goal, given that's been a plan that we've been working on for many years and looking for improvement along that corridor. But, so that's a separate issue. I think in some ways it's a separate issue and it's reflected in the minutes, and that's good. This, again, is just kind of this is a plan. This is not a budget document. So my concern is to get hung up on these numbers and to compare them as if they're budget numbers is not really doing any justice to what the issues we're facing.
Okay, I'm almost done.
Joe, go ahead. Then Steve, well, I'm gonna go to Steve. I'm gonna go to Steve and then Joe.
Okay.
So this is a capital improvement plan. You know, I don't think there's anything specific about any capital for the Grand River Improvement Authority. So what, I mean, funding different things, you know, it's good for discussion, but it's not like the snow removal where we're talking a piece of equipment. At this point, for the capital improvement program, unless there's something capital-wise to discuss on the Grand River, I think that's a different budgetary discussion, not part of the capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Steve. Let me go
Go ahead.
Barry, then I'll come back to you, Joe. Barry.
Well, I was the chair of the Grand River Authority at one time, and when Mr. Schwartz came onto the committee after I had been on it for a while, and if you look at the pamphlet, my name is on it. The funding was set up many years ago, along with joint ordinances passed with the city of Farmington. The funding was strictly by capture of money from values of the property going up. Of course, when we passed But that's the funding of of that particular thing. It's based on legislation, and that's where the funding was supposed to come from. There was no additional taxes or anything like that. It was capturing increase in value from taxes, from the increase in value of the property. And so it was never set up to be funded by either city. It was supposed to be, by taking money out of our regular funds to do it, it was supposed to be based upon value of property rising. The problem we had is that after we passed the Corridor Improvement Authority, the market dropped. Property values plummeted, so there was no money being made to be resunk into the buildings along the way to help rehab them. So it was never meant to come out of our regular budget anyways. It was supposed to be captured money, just like the Brownfield Real Development Authority, we use recaptured funds also. So the question is, were they gonna be putting money into that Corridor Improvement Authority? No, it was gonna be captured funds from increase in value. So it's not gonna be showing up here. Many years ago, when we did the capital improvement program, they actually did show you where all the money came from, but because some people were complaining about it being too burdensome, and some people just didn't like us doing capital improvement program, they kept making it shorter and shorter. And what used to take days to go talk to members of the different departments, now is done in one day. And the question of where the money comes from, you could have asked that in January when they were all here. Okay? But you're not going to be taking $200,000 out of our budget and throwing it into the Corridor Improvement Authority, because that's not the way the funding's set up for that particular organization.
Thank you, Barry. Joe?
Thank you. And that's why I started with, where's the money coming from the Hawk? If the Hawk is for the Hawk and the Caustic Center, and if the money is not coming from a Parks and Rec millage, and it's coming from the general fund, then what, we can't fund improvements along Grand River because we tied our hands? Anyways, I'll go back and give specific guidance as to what Joe would like to see in the capital improvement plan next year on Grand River. I realize that Grand River is, I believe, a state road, which also means I believe there's probably some state funding available. But I would like to see funding on Grand River for separated bike lanes that are painted green, just like they have down Grand River in Detroit and they have in Ferndale. I would like to see that estimate in the capital improvement plan. You can call it my Hawk Road if you want.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. We appreciate it. And the minutes will reflect Joe's comments on the projects going forward. As it relates to capital fund, I don't think they don't know what's going to be millage related, what's capital fund. They don't, at this point, they don't. And I'm sure that if they got to a point, they broke down whatever their budget is, some would be apportioned to the millage, some would be portion requested through capital funds. So I don't think, to answer that question, there's not an answer to that question at this point, because they haven't looked that far ahead and they don't know the funding, and it's not a budget document.
I'm ready to vote.
So we do have a motion, an amended motion to adopt the plan made by Barry, seconded by Steve, with Joe's amendment to add $50,000 to DPWs for a sweeper, sidewalk sweeper. You could say, if you want to recommend, that's for 12-mile Grand River. That's the motion. Any questions of the motion?
For the year 2027.
Thank you. 27, 28, correct. Thank you, Barry. All in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it unanimously. The plan is adopted and it'll be passed on to City Council at their next, next appropriate meeting. Okay, that ends our public hearing. Now we're going into regular business. Is item number 5A, Site Plan 6812-2021. Location is parcel south of 34700 Grand River Avenue. Parcel ID is 2321-376-021. Proposal, new commercial building for manufacturing and LI1, Light Industrial District. Action requested site plan approval by the Planning Commission. Applicant is Jinggen Electric and owner Jinggen Electric. I think, Joe, are we starting with you? You're going to do an overview?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Take it.
So you will likely recognize this property as one that was rezoned last year. Originally, this portion of the site was B3, and it was rezoned to LI1 last year to facilitate a site plan, an expansion of the existing manufacturing facility on the site. So they're proposing to build an addition. 73,667 square feet of new manufacturing and warehouse space on 2 stories, and 10,227 square feet of new office space on 3 stories. The existing building is 83,819 square feet. At the time of writing the letter, we didn't have a full breakdown of the office and manufacturing and warehouse square footage of the building. That has since been provided, and you should have had that at your spaces when you got here. So we're looking at 6.65 acres. I guess I can let them talk about what they do. They do something with electric powertrains, but I'll let them elaborate on that. Look at the surrounding properties. We have LI1 to the north and east, C2 to the south, that's in Farmington. And then to the west, we have B3, and there's a large office site on that. And then this site is accessed via a driveway off Grand River, which is shared with the neighboring industrial sites. So manufacturing is a principally permitted use in the LI1 district. It does have some standards associated with it, which are in the letter. We'll look at the dimensional standards for that district. They are meeting all the setbacks. I'd like them to specifically label what each of the setbacks is precisely on the plan. They do exceed the minimums, though. That much is clear from the information provided. Building meets the height requirement. We've got a note on loading spaces here. They have a requirement of 6 loading spaces. They have 4 loading docks. The actual area that's dedicated to the loading bay exceeds the required area for 6 spaces, but with just 4 docks, obviously there's some operational stuff going on there. So basically, I think the Planning Commission should address that issue in any motion to approve. If you feel that they've got the requirement, then you should note that. Rooftop equipment, we noted it wasn't addressed on the plans. I have since talked to the applicant's architect, and they have noted that the parapet of the roof is 5 feet and will screen any rooftop equipment. So that's a note that should be added to the plan, but I'm satisfied that that would be adequate screening for any rooftop equipment. We look at the landscape area abutting the street or freeway. The width, when I measure it on the plans, it's compliant, but it should be dimensioned on the plan. The dumpster enclosure is shown on the plan right next to the loading dock. A detail wasn't provided, so that is something that will need to be provided. The mechanical equipment comment is actually accounted for by the rooftop equipment comment that I just made a moment ago. When we look at minimum parking, they had a calculation that was based, well, it was really based on just the manufacturing standard. We've always broken it down based on the uses in the building. They have some manufacturing, they have some warehouse, and they have some office. So the breakdown that they provided, which was waiting for you when you got here, breaks the building down that way. I'm looking for it. Well, I've got it electronically. So
what they come out with is they originally had a 218 space requirement, and now they've got 215. So when they broke it down, it actually came out to almost exactly the same amount of spaces. And they're showing 218 on the site. However, when we look at the locations of those spaces, the dimensions of the spaces are all fine, and the maneuvering lanes. But we have this kind of complex standard here in our ordinance where off-street parking spaces can be located in a side or rear yard, and they're not permitted in a minimum front yard setback. And in the LI1 district, off-street parking for visitors over and above the number of spaces required under section 34.5.2 may be permitted within the required front yard, provided that such off-street parking is not located within 20 feet of the front lot line, and provided further that the number of such spaces does not equal more than 10% of the total number of spaces required. So they've got a bay of parking arrayed along the southern front of the building. That's partially within the 50-foot setback. And then 6 additional spaces that encroach partially into the setback over in the main lot. That's for a total of 23 spaces. The way they've recalculated things, they've got a couple of they would be able to put several fewer spaces in that area. However, they're still not spaces that are in excess of the requirement. So they're still not meeting that requirement. There are really 3 options for addressing the lack of compliance with that requirement. One is to redesign to move the spaces. And the other options both involve a variance. One would be a variance to eliminate the spaces in the required front yard setback. And the other would be a variance to permit the placement of spaces within the required front yard setback. Now, in my discussion with the applicant, they noted that they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 132 employees were going to be the maximum on the site. So I suspect I know which of those 3 options they would probably ultimately prefer, but I'll let them address that. Just looking at other highlighted items. When we look at our total number of trees on the site, we have, they're fine on the parking lot trees. It's when we get down to the tree replacement that there is something that you're going to have to make a finding on. So they've got a requirement to replace 44 trees. And our ordinance has a provision in it that says when replacement or relocation of trees on site or on a one-to-one basis is not feasible and or desirable, the Planning Commission may substitute greater size for replacement trees. So they have a number of trees that they're proposing, a number of deciduous trees that they're proposing to put in at a 4-inch caliper, which is 1 inch larger than the minimum that we require. And then they have a number of evergreen trees that they are proposing to put in at a 12-inch minimum or 12-foot minimum height rather than an 8-foot minimum height. And what they are asking is that the Planning Commission find that the larger sizes at planting equate to the 44 trees. Now you can do the math on the caliper, right? Where you've got 4-inch caliper versus 3-inch caliper, so you've got trees that the extra inches add up to a certain number of trees equivalent, right? And then they're looking at the height of these evergreens and they're saying, well, it's kind of the same difference, a 4-to-3 ratio, basically, in terms of the inches that you would have for caliper on the deciduous trees. So when you do the math, it comes out to 44 trees. That is something that the Planning Commission has to approve. So if you want any further clarity on that, I'll try my best. But
Pretty good.
at any point, at any rate, if you're going to approve that, it would have to be a finding in your motion of approval, okay? Looking at the lighting, we have a couple kind of administrative items there. A needed adjustment in the average to minimum illumination ratio. There are 2 points where we have light values that exceed 0.3-foot candles at the property line. And then some notes to be added to the plan. And then the last item that we had highlighted is that there's not a pedestrian connection to the Grand River sidewalk provided.
Any questions for Mr. Tangari? Joe?
Back to the item that you just talked about with the trees.
Sure.
It seems like the first thing is the question of, is there a place to put the required trees? They say there isn't. Did you make a determination? Do you agree?
The way the site is designed now, they've got trees on pretty much all the treeable parts of the site.
So you agree with that? That's fine. I wasn't necessarily questioning it. It just seems that that's step one. You agree. So step two is we can either say, all right, put the bigger trees in, or we can say you have to pay into the tree fund,
That's correct, yes.
right? The person who used to run the tree fund and knows all about trees is going to replace Ed in 2 weeks. So I'm just suggesting that we leave that decision, if we decide to say, if we agree with you that there's no place to put them, leave the decision to the staff as to whether or not to go with the bigger trees or the money in the tree fund. I think that you have a better sense of it than all of us non-botanists.
I will defer to staff.
Right.
Rather than
Exactly. I'm
answer for
talking about staff and let the planning department make that decision. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and part of that, Joe, we'd want to know how flush that fund is.
And they know that.
Right, we don't want to keep growing the fund, I'd rather have the trees planted, and if larger trees, well, money just sits in a bank.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good point. Thanks, Joe. Are we done with the presentation?
Yes, that was it.
Thank you very much. Now it's time for the applicant. If we could come on up and speak on behalf of the site plan, give your name and address, who you represent.
Yeah, hi. Bill Cockrum.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, Bill Cockrum.
Bill?
I'm the general manager at JJE North America.
Welcome.
My address is 854 Flowering Plum in Brighton, Michigan. So can I use the present?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Let's get this rolling.
Could you spell your last name?
Cockrum, C-O-C-K-R-U-M.
C-O-C-K-R-U-N.
Yeah, M is in Mary.
And we need you to speak right into that mic, because we're having a hard time picking you up up here. Don't be shy.
Left side, right side. Okay, it's up, yeah, great. Okay, just like to share a little overview on JJE, and then we can answer any questions. And thank you, Joe, for the introduction there. Okay, so this is our current location, as you noted, 34700 Grand River Avenue. The current facility, which we purchased in May of 2020, and we've done significant renovations throughout the building, prepping it for our manufacturing. JJE company overview here. So JJE is a recognized technology leader in electric drive motors and drive systems. We recently went public on the Shanghai Stock Exchange in October of 21. We hold leading positions in both pass car and commercial vehicle segments, looking to expand here in North America and Europe. So we're looking to expand our footprint here locally so that we can serve our customers. We've received many product and quality awards. We've been recognized by awards and also FCA, or the current Stellantis North American Group, and 3-time winner of the Heart of China Best 10 EV Powertrain Award. These are the type of products that we're producing on the right side there. We do electric three-phase motors. We actually produce transmission components or reducers. We do power electronics. We have multiple controllers that we design and manufacture. And we also produce clutches, disconnect systems, differential locks. And then we also do what we call a 3-in-1 assembly, where we produce the entire drive system that can be used in electric vehicles, whether those are commercial vehicles or pass car vehicles. Here's some of the images here from our Farmington Hills site. So very automated operation, minimizes the number of operators, but we do have a significant number of operators. Right now we run two 10-hour shifts, 5 to 6 days a week, and I think we're currently employing up to 102 employees now at the site and looking to expand that further. These are the type of products that we want to bring. So we want to look at transferring this manufacturing from our facilities in the China region to Farmington Hills. These are our hairpin designs, and again, these are used on a lot of pass car applications. And again, here's some of the products that we have made for the last 2-3 years. These are some of the rotors and stator products that are used in the hybrid vehicle shown there below, the Pacifica. And again, we've received awards from FCA and been recognized by awards for top best engines. I prepared this here. This is kind of an employee headcount forecast. We have a 2-shift operation. We run either 8 to 10 hours per shift. The first shift maximum here off to the far right is 144 employees that would be in the building at a given shift. And then our second shift a little bit lighter with 84. So we're looking to add roughly 50 to 60 employees with the expansion. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? Proponent? Joe?
I don't.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. This is more an example of reviewing the documents associated with your proposal that leads to some questions that have nothing to do with my decision as to whether or not to approve your request.
Okay.
But the fire chief said something about needing, that caught my eye, about needing to be notified if you were storing or, to do with lithium batteries, right? Contact the fire department if this occupancy is testing or storing lithium-ion batteries on site.
Yeah, very good question.
And I saw that batteries was on your list.
That's a product line that we're pursuing globally, but we have no plans to build any battery packs at this location, only the electric motor portion.
So as a planning commissioner, that makes me wonder, well, is anyone who bought an electric car supposed to tell the fire department? See? I'm looking at perhaps having a battery backup system in my house instead of a generator. So this is a segue to ask our staff, Eric, to touch base with the fire department and ask them if there are potential issues that we should be aware of that relate to battery backups for homes and the charging or, the vehicles. Okay? I have no idea. It just popped up on his letter to you. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry for taking up your time. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other issue? They talked about parking. We got a ZBA pending issue, Joe, with regard to parking?
Yes, well, they obviously have the option to do some redesign to get those spaces out of that front setback. But their other options are to pursue a variance, either for the location of those spaces or to eliminate the spaces that are encroaching into the setback.
So, Bill, what is your plan with regard to the parking there?
So just a few comments on that. I mean, we are adopting a lot more of a hybrid schedule, flex schedule for our employees. A lot of employees are not working in the building as much so as they were maybe 2-3 years ago. And again, because of the highly automated lines, we really don't have as many people maybe as you would have historically in a manufacturing site. And so you can see our numbers here on the earlier slide. I mean, we're projecting maybe up to 150, but not near the 200. We definitely want to have, spaces for the handicap sites and also for visitors, which we can have up to 10 or 12 visitors at a time. So I think yeah, go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
Name,
We need
please.
your name.
Name and address.
Yeah, my name is Alex Orman, I'm engineer for the site, so, ORMAN,
Say it again.
ORMAN,
ORMAN.
yes.
Thank you.
So
If you
just-
have cards too, give them to her.
Yeah, if you have a business card, that'd be
That
great.
just helps.
Sure, I'll give it to you later. So, just a little clarification on the parking calculations. So, and I'm thinking that you had received my emails this morning. Excuse me. So we came up based on the warehouse, manufacturing, office, so on all calculations, the required number of parking spaces are 215. So the provided number of spaces, 217, so 2 extra spaces. The access of the parking spaces, visitor, excuse me, visitor parking spaces in 50-foot setback is, I think, by 2 cars. And that's what we have extra 2 spaces, which is we're going to eliminate.
There are 25 spaces that are partial, or 23 spaces that are
Right.
partially in that required
So
setback.
10% is gonna be 21, 22.
Yeah, but the standard is that any spaces that are in the required setback have to be in excess of the requirement. So it's a strange standard because it's split up into 3 different places in the ordinance, which is, I understand, not ideal, but that's the standard, is that the only spaces that are allowed to be in the required front setback are those spaces that are in excess of the required number of spaces, and it can't be more than 10% of the requirement. So it's there's kind of a few parts that assemble to make the full standard.
Yes, so from our understanding, since we have 215 required, so we can allow to have 22, and that's what we were planning to put it, so.
Right, but again, those 20-something spaces are not in excess of the requirement,
They're part of the
so they
required.
can't be in that setback.
And I include.
So they
can't be-
make up the required, part of the required parking.
Exactly, they make up part of the requirement.
The not required parking can be within that setback. So how do we fix that? I mean, is there, you
Well, I
talked about
guess
And
we
seek a
can,
variance.
seek a variance or a redesign?
yeah, it's hard to redesign because we're really packed with this
Right.
layout, so more likely we're probably gonna apply for ZBA, so.
Okay, okay. So that'll be the approach on the parking. Okay. We're set with the issue. Commission, have any questions about the larger size evergreens and deciduous trees? Are we comfortable with Joe's review of that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Any other question?
It wasn't Joe's review, it was the city staff.
City staff's review, everybody's review. Yeah.
Before you proceed with that, I want to make sure that we're not overstepping maybe a legal question that the city attorney could weigh on as to the fact that the zoning ordinance specifically states that the planning commission is to make the finding. I don't know if
Right.
legally we can, you could delegate that to an administrative official, I think is a bit of a open question.
No, we understand that that's going to be a finding by the planning commission in our motion that will say, based on all the evidence, whatever it makes sense, that we can go with the larger size caliper trees and taller evergreen trees based on the information we received. And we'll make that part of our finding. Thank you, Eric. Are there any other issues?
Loading? Is the loading,
Loading?
yeah,
Yep, we're gonna.
Yes, we would like to address that too. So, as Joe mentioned, so yes, it is a 4 base, but in the square footage of the parking space, I'm sorry, loading and unloading spaces. So over the, whatever it's required, because 6 spaces, each space is 10 by 50, 500, so 6 is 3,000, and we have over 3,600 square feet loading and unloading area. So we're asking you to take that into consideration and approve that.
So through the chair, is Joe saying that you can either make a finding that that's the equivalent of meeting the ordinance, or theoretically, you could add that to the list of variances? I don't know if Joe has a
Yeah,
recommendation.
I would,
which way to
yeah,
go.
that, I would agree with that, yeah. Yeah, if the planning commission makes a finding that the square footage is adequate to meet the requirement, then that's your finding and they can move on. If you're going to go by the number of actual loading docks, then they would just add that to their
Okay,
variances.
so to the consultant and to staff, are there any pitfalls with what they propose from a practical application of their plan?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's helpful to the planning commission. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so there would be also a finding on that, on the issue of loading and unloading. There would have to be a finding on the plantings. And so we got the parking issue that they have talked about going to the ZBA for that, and we have made motions to, yes, Steve?
All the documentation items like the dumpster, the setbacks.
Right, right.
Sidewalk to
The pedestrian connection, yeah.
Okay,
We need to make a determination on the connection to the sidewalk.
Which is very easy to do, it's just a slip away that, so it's just a small portion of the sidewalk will be connected to the existing sidewalk along the Grand River, so, from the parking lot.
okay. So does somebody want to make a motion with all
Yeah.
these items?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Marissa.
I move that site plan 6812-2021 dated February 22nd, 2022, submitted by Jing Jing, be approved because it appears to meet all applicable requirements of the zoning chapter, subject to the following conditions. So bear with me for one moment. The Planning Commission will find that the allocated square footage for the loading spaces is adequate. The number of parking spaces will need to be addressed with the ZBA for a variance or be redesigned, your choice. Additionally, based on evidence, we'd like to delegate that the determination of the larger trees be decided by staff. Either larger trees will meet the requirement or that we would make the determination on the tree fund or no?
Or you want me to wait to the?
Am I not
do it now?
stating that correctly?
Let's wait to make the motion.
Okay,
we'll
and then amend it.
yeah,
All right.
we'll
Thank you.
comment
Additionally, the agreement to make the pedestrian connection required to Grand River and the sidewalk, as well as addressing all labeling and documentation corrections identified by the consultant.
Support. Support by John. Marissa, John. Okay,
Just quick,
Joe, quick question.
I thought I heard you say the number of parking spots as opposed to the location of the parking spots.
I think the number and the location are the issue, correct?
Well, we've got the issue of the
Proximity.
location of the parking
The-
and the setback.
Right.
So, yeah, so they meet the
The
minimum
number
required,
requirement,
but it's
but
the
it's being
placement.
placed in the wrong,
They
In the
do not
setback,
need
but
those
the-
parking spots to meet the minimum.
I think they do.
They do,
They do.
they do.
They're counting them.
They're part of required, they're not additional parking within the setback. They're required parking within the setback. Is that correct?
So it's the number and location
Yes.
Number and
in the
location of
motion,
parking.
number and location.
Location. Thank you, Joe. So questions about, I think we need maybe to discuss the plantings, the
just-
finding on the plantings.
So for item number 3, before you get to the delegation thing, you need to make a finding that the oversizing of the trees would be acceptable. What you're delegating, so that's your finding. What you're delegating is if there's a reason that staff comes up with that they would rather have a donation into the tree fund. Is that?
Thank you. Okay.
So Cheryl, you got that?
I'll figure that out.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we're making a finding, the larger, based on the evidence, larger is okay with us.
Okay, but the final determination will be by staff.
Staff on whether they do take the funds.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
thank you.
Okay, good motion, support. Any other questions, comments on the motion? All good? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. No nays? The ayes have it. Congratulations, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
investing in Farmington Hills.
Expanding in Farmington Hills.
Thank you.
Now the
you.
geese will have no place to go, thank God.
Hang on.
Okay,
Can't apologize.
we could do it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item is approval of the February 17th, 2021 minutes. 2022 minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Barry, seconded by John. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. At this moment, let's receive public comment. Any public comment for the good of the commission and community? Seeing none, we'll move on to commissioners' comments. Joe?
I just want to clarify what I said earlier about wanting to see the green pathway. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but they actually paint the roadway green and the like. I just want to make it clear that I'm talking about ideally east of the city of Farmington and minimally east of Middle Belt Road. Okay, that's the area I was talking about. And that is, you know, the part of the corridor improvement area, as opposed to all of Grand River way out there where Haggerty is. Okay, thank you.
John?
No, I don't have anything.
I have,
Melissa?
so at the study session on, was that Monday night? On Monday night, with Steve Schwartz resignation, for the subcommittee that's going to support the master planning with, jointly with the city council, just wanted to make the note that you're gonna step up. Right, we discussed it. I don't know if we need approval though
I
for
think it needs a motion.
Joe. Does it need a motion?
Yeah, I
Okay,
did for the original one, so.
okay, so I motion that Joe Manti be nominated to the subcommittee for the master planning group jointly with city council.
Support. Good choice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Joe, congratulations.
Thank you, Dale.
You'll do a good job.
And then also, so city council appointed a new commissioner. Will we be shared their information?
Yeah, we can share their name. I mean, her name is Taranji Grant is her name. She's a Realtor by profession. And, you know, we'll be getting a little orientation in place before the next meeting, and hopefully she'll be, you know, ready to hit the ground running.
Okay,
Hey, Eric, could you have, if you or Jerry sent out just a little email to us of introduction of the new commissioner, just her name and what she does, that would just basically what you just said, so we have something in writing, okay?
Yeah, we can
and
send
then maybe, and we can welcome her
Yeah,
right.
personally as well.
Yeah, if you got contact information, that would be a nice touch. Thank you.
Get Jerry to make a cake.
And then I also submitted 2 candidates for appointment for the additional positions. Just want to make sure everyone's received that.
Yep. All the parties have received it. City manager's office has received them, and
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So this is filling, so this one that's starting with us next April is for Duke, right?
Yeah.
So we still got Bob and now Steve, right? Okay. Okay. Barry?
Well, was kind of surprised that Steve resigned. Maybe it had something to do with the U of M game on tonight, I don't know. But he's always been a great addition to the planning commission. He's always been a big help to the city. I know the person that's being appointed to fill one of the spots has also been involved in the city for many years on other commissions. And I think she was the chair of one of the commissions. And we welcome Ms. Grant to this group. And I wish you could warm her up. How's that?
It's getting there.
Steve?
Good.
I echo Barry's comments about Steve Schwartz. Gonna miss him, and sorry to see him go. And he made many contributions and had great ideas, and we're gonna miss that. And so we'll go from there. That's all I have. Eric, I noticed, I'll catch you after the meeting. We got some other kind of administrative things to go over. Okay? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
John moved, Barry second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, or all opposed, say no. No, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good one. We'll see everyone next month.
You gotta do is use the hammer.